We live in a very divided world right now with these two extreme factions on either side. We have the left and the right on each side. Or it's not always about politics, it's about movies, TV, the trans debate. So you've got these two extreme sides shouting at each other and us moderate sane people in the middle, and they're saying to us, we're right, join us. Or they're saying, we're right, join us. In a lot of ways, this week's episode of Doctor Who, Lucky Day, sums up this divided world. I started up by loving this episode and thinking, oh no. I mean, it was a little bit predictable. I knew it, but I started to hate on the episode. But by the end of the episode, I really loved it. So let's discuss this week's episode of Doctor Who. Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. I am Mick, your host with the most to start your girlfriends and your wives. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad. X on TikTok, Mad Mickey's World. Snapchat, BMouth60 Mick, your host with the most. A very warm welcome. So we are talking about and reviewing Season 2, Episode 4 of Doctor Who, Lucky Day. And be warned, it is a Doctor Light episode, and there's always been this debate. Should there be an episode of a show called Doctor Who where the Doctor and his companion are barely in it? So the reason for this is, and they've been doing this for quite a few years, is because of scheduling. It's easier for them to pull out the actor who's playing the Doctor at the time and the full-time companion, because then they're shooting other stuff for the finale. So even though I think it's not right not to have, the Doctor front and centre of an episode of Doctor Who, they always seem to give us something very interesting, in terms of Blink and other episodes. But there's a lot of Doctor Who fans who passionately get annoyed by that. But it's not the only reason you may not like this week's episode of Doctor Who. It is very political. It's very current day in the way it's set up. Now, let's begin from the beginning. So this episode focuses on the Doctor's former companion, Ruby Sunday, played by the brilliant, ever-talented Millie Gibson. And I'm glad to see her back. I was very excited by her casting. I was disappointed that Russell never fleshed out her companion and never really justified her friendship with the Doctor. It didn't feel like RTD in a way, the way he fleshes out characters. I was very disappointed and heartbroken for Millie Gibson. But I digress. So, going into this episode, I wasn't particularly excited by an episode, even though I adore Millie, of just Ruby Sunday. So what happens is we meet this little boy, and the Doctor and Belinda land in 2007, and this little boy is gobsmacked. The Doctor is all friendly, gives him a 50p, and then the little boy runs away. And that's all we see of the Doctor. That's all we see of Belinda for the whole episode. But we'll see the Doctor again at the end of the episode. So this young boy grows up. I forgot the character's name. I do apologise. But the actor is absolutely killing this performance. If you want to learn about acting, watch what this guy does in this episode. So anyway, he's basically looking for anyone who knows anything about the Doctor. And he finds Ruby Sunday. He interviews her at the podcast. She says, look, there's things about the Doctor I'm not going to tell you. I can't reveal. Out of friendship and loyalty. They seem to bond and they start dating and they kind of become a couple. He seems like a really nice, sweet guy. Now, I've been saying all week on social media, this guy is going to end up being a villain. It's so damn obvious, for many reasons. Because of what I said on the top of the show. Because we live in a divided world, and you've got one half who hate a certain group of people, and then you've got another, you've got people on the right side of the argument who hate everybody else. And this is where we are today, and in a lot of ways, it sums up the divided world that we live in. Now, this episode is written by Pete McTiege. Now, I like Pete McTiege as a writer, and you know what? After watching this episode, and not everyone's going to agree, I think he would make a great showrunner of Doctor Who if the show indeed survives this era of Doctor Who. But I think Pete's a great writer, and he does a really, really good job. Anyway, this guy takes Ruby to the country to meet his friends, and then because basically what happens if we go back, this guy is investigating, and he's sludged over by these aliens, and he sees the Doctor and Ruby kind of stop these aliens, and this sludge goes on them, and the Doctor explains to Ruby that she has to drink this orange juice, or basically they'll be able to track us. But the guy's got the orange sludge as well, or the green sludge over him, so they can track him. So anyway, he takes her to this village, and all of a sudden, these aliens arrive, and, prior to that, Ruby gives him some of this juice that he's supposed to drink, but he reveals he hasn't drank it, so the aliens can actually trace him. And it turns out that these are not the aliens anyway, they're just his friends pretending to be the aliens. They take their masks off. And it turns out this lovely, sweet guy is part of a movement that's trying to expose UNIT and the Doctor and Ruby Sunday for being liars. So they're these kind of activists, they're these online people who are against, they don't believe there's aliens, right? They don't believe there's Cybermen or Daleks, right? So they're a passionate movement trying to expose UNIT, the Doctor, and etc. The performance of this guy playing Ruby's love interest, as I say, is absolutely outstanding. And it gets very deep and very dark very quickly. And clearly, the commentary from Pete McTiege is very interesting. He's talking about certain movements, political movements, but not just political movements. People with YouTube channels, influencers, seducing the innocent and, bringing out their hate and fears, right? To take their side so they can profit from them, right? This is who this guy is. So anyway, there's a standoff in the third act of the episode at UNIT. And he makes the mistake of insulting the Brigadier, right? Lethbridge Stewart. So Kate's in this episode. Kate does not like this. So she releases the alien. Now the alien's tracking him because he had the sludge, right? And he's broken into UNIT. He wants, he's already shot a security guard. And he's begging Kate to stop this alien. And basically, she's saying, come on then, confess. You wanted me to confess that there's no such thing as aliens. Now, I want you to admit, because he's got a cam for his viewers to see, see Kate and UNIT confess that they're a bunch of liars. And in the end, it's all turned around. And I'm kind of thinking at this moment, the Doctor's going to turn up and save him. The Doctor's going to make some speech and mock him in front of Ruby. Now listen, there's a lot of current day things. There is a little bit of man bashing in this episode because they can't help themselves, right? Look, so that's just the way that it is. But as I said with the first episode with the planet Incel, I look beyond that, and I look beyond those problems in this episode. But Pete McTiege is nothing if not a great writer. And the way it twists in the middle of the episode, and that's the moment when I'm thinking, I'm not going to like this episode. Oh, no. But by the end, right, it's really, really good, and it's really dark, and you get this great scene when the guy's in prison. The Doctor kind of lands the TARDIS in his cell, and he's in the TARDIS. And him and this guy, the Doctor, have this amazing standoff. And Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, again, is really growing on me. It's a great standoff. The dialogue doesn't take a side. It shows, the perspective of this guy and the perspective of the Doctor. And it's a really, really good scene. And the Doctor's saying this stuff, people just want to eat. I'm protecting these people who are just innocent people, just want to eat, survive, go to work. And people like you, are playing on their fears. Which is very, very true. That's what I mean. Pete McTiege makes some very valid points. And I don't want to name drop certain YouTubers or, certain influencers who are doing this today just to make some coin from our fears. But Pete McTiege, whether you like it or not, is making some very valid points. So despite it being a Dr. Light episode, I thought it was fantastic. It puts Ruby in this really kind of take charge situation, and ultimately it's Ruby who saves this guy's life. When he reveals himself as this bad guy who wants to prove that Unit are really bad, he's mocking Ruby for conning her. And during that moment, I'm thinking, oh God, it's the bad bloke versus the good woman. Listen, I knew that he was going to end up being an a-hole, a villain. It's obvious. Attractive, young, straight, white guy. He was always going to be bad from the mindset of the people that make Doctor Who. Because they believe that people of colour, Asian people, trans people, gay people, that they've never done anything wrong, that they're not bad people. And the only bad people in society are the patriarchy, the straight white male. This is what these people believe, So, at the end of the day, that's their belief system. This is what I'm talking about. Both sides are very extreme in their views. We're divided in this world full of extreme views, two sides. And both sides are actually quite bigoted towards the other side. So you get some of that bigotry in this episode. But I still really like this episode, considering it was a Dr. Light episode. And we get a great ending. Because, of course, Mrs. Flood shows up in every single episode of this season. And so far, the first 3 reveals of Mrs. Flood have been very, very interesting. And this one is even more interesting. It's brilliant. He's locked in his cell. Mrs. Flood turns out with the keys, and she goes, I'm the governor. Ooh. Is governor another word for the master? I hope it's not as obvious as it being, her being the master, but we will see. She releases this guy. We know the finale is titled The Reality War. So what's it all about? I think RTD could be building up to something very, very exciting. But some of you are going to hate this episode. Some of you are going to love this episode. So if you're watching this on YouTube, get down in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this week's episode of Doctor Who. Lucky day. I thought the cast were brilliant. But I think that Pete McTiege should replace Russell T Davies when it's the right time to be running Doctor Who.